She whispered, "One bed, no rules," and slid under the sheets without hesitation. The stars stretched endlessly across the vast blackness of space. Planetary systems twinkled far below, distant and unreachable, but to Captain Alex, Nova, Harper, they were just another backdrop to the mission at hand. In her mind, there was only one focus: the mission. The ancient relic of the Kyrex, an alien race thought to be extinct, was hidden somewhere on the barren planet below, and it was humanity's first chance to secure one of their greatest secrets. The crew of the Vanguard was nervous but prepared. They had trained for months. Each member knew their role, and though the odds of success were slim, they had one thing that the Kyrex didn't: humanity's will to survive. 10 minutes to drop zone, Nova's voice echoed in the confined space of the ship's briefing room. Lieutenant Liam Warden, her second-in-command, gave a reassuring nod. He was the most experienced in combat among the crew, calm under pressure, and a born strategist. Still, even his usual confident demeanor was shaken, as they all knew the stakes. The Kyrex were not a race to be underestimated. They had the reputation of being ruthless and clever, and their homeworld was rumored to be a maze of traps and high-tech defenses. "I'll prep the gear," Liam said, moving to the equipment table. His hands worked quickly, adjusting the laser-cut gear and double-checking the comms equipment. He looked back up at Nova. "You're sure about this? I mean, breaking in, taking the relic, and getting out alive." Nova's lips curved into a tight, determined smile. "It's what we do best, isn't it? We survive and we adapt. We've trained for this moment, we'll make it." Liam didn't respond immediately. His eyes flickered with an unreadable expression, but he nodded. It wasn't the time for questions. The ship shuddered slightly as it entered the atmosphere of the Kyrex homeworld. Nova walked over to the window, looking down at the dark planet below, the jungle-covered mountains stretching into the sky. The Kyrex capital was located deep within these jungles, a fortress city that was rumored to be filled with traps, secret passageways, and ancient technology. As the Vanguard descended, the crew geared up. Each member was calm, but there was a sharp intensity to their movements. The mission had been planned meticulously, but plans often went awry. Nova had no illusions about that. The drop zone was an ancient temple, hidden in the jungle like the rest of the Kyrex civilization. They would need to travel through dense foliage, scale cliffs, and move in total silence to avoid detection. The jungle was not just a natural danger, but a labyrinth of old Kyrex tech that could detect even the faintest movement. The hatch opened with a hiss and Nova stepped out first, her boots crunching against the moist ground. The air was thick and humid, the heat almost unbearable, but Nova barely noticed. Her focus was already elsewhere. She scanned the horizon with practiced eyes. "Stay close, move fast, and remember our objective," Nova ordered, her voice steady and clear. The team formed a tight formation behind her, their weapons raised, eyes scanning the surroundings. Each member was silent as they moved through the dense jungle, the shadows of towering trees and massive vines swallowing them whole. The only sound was the occasional snap of a twig underfoot or the distant calls of unknown creatures. An hour into their trek, they reached the base of a mountain where the first of many obstacles awaited. A massive stone wall, covered with moss and hidden in plain sight. It looked like an ancient part of the temple, but Nova knew better. The Kyrex had built everything with purpose, and nothing was as simple as it seemed. Liam moved forward, inspecting the wall. "This doesn't look like any normal structure," he said quietly. He pulled out a scanner, sweeping it across the surface. "It's some kind of energy field." "Can you disable it?" Nova asked. Liam paused, looking at the wall. "Maybe it'll take some time." Nova turned to the team. "Cover him. We don't know how many Kyrex patrols are out here." They spread out, taking defensive positions, eyes trained on the thick jungle that surrounded them. Every rustle of leaves, every shift in the air, felt like a threat. Time stretched on, every second feeling like an eternity. Liam worked quickly, his hands flying over the scanner, muttering to himself as he tapped keys and adjusted settings. Nova's heart beat steadily, but her mind raced with possible scenarios, all of them dangerous. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Liam straightened up. It's done. The field's down. The stone wall slid open with a low rumble, revealing a dark passage leading deeper into the mountain. Nova motioned for the team to move forward. They entered the passage, the air colder now, the walls lined with strange symbols that none of them recognized. The atmosphere felt ancient, as if the air itself had been locked away for centuries. The passage twisted and turned, leading them to a large chamber at the heart of the mountain. Inside, an alien device sat at the center, glowing faintly. "This is it," Nova said, her voice barely a whisper. The relic they were here to steal was just ahead, encased in an energy field that hummed with silent power. "Watch for traps," Liam warned, his eyes scanning every corner of the room. Nova stepped forward cautiously, her eyes fixed on the relic. But as her hand reached out to touch it, the room trembled. The ground beneath their feet shook, and suddenly the once quiet passage was filled with the sharp hiss of alien weapons charging. "Ambush!" Nova shouted. "Everyone move!" The team scattered, diving for cover behind pillars and massive stone blocks. The air was filled with blinding flashes of light as alien drones emerged from hidden recesses in the walls, their weapons primed. Nova raised her own weapon, firing a series of shots at the nearest drone. The laser bolts hit their mark, but the drones were relentless, moving in perfect formation. The team had only one option now: fight their way out. Liam's voice cut through the chaos. "Nova, we need to fall back to the entrance. The whole place is going to collapse." Nova didn't hesitate. She signaled to the team and they began retreating, their weapons firing as they ran. The ground continued to shake beneath them, and the temple's ceiling cracked above them. Dust filled the air and the passage began to collapse, piece by piece. It was chaos, but Nova was focused. As they sprinted back toward the entrance, the team fought off waves of drones, covering each other's backs, pushing forward despite the ever-growing danger. With every step, Nova felt the weight of the mission heavy on her shoulders. They had come for the relic, but it seemed the Kyrics weren't ready to give up their secrets so easily. The jungle was no longer their primary concern. The ground was shaking with every tremor from the collapsing temple, and the sound of drone gunfire echoed through the passage. Nova led her team in a frantic dash back toward the entrance, but the Kyrics weren't giving up. It wasn't just the drones they had to worry about now. The temple itself seemed alive, collapsing and shifting in a way that suggested it was part of a larger, more dangerous machine. "Faster!" Nova yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. Her heart pounded as they sprinted, dodging falling debris and laser fire. Behind her, she heard the voices of her crew shouting commands, keeping the drones at bay. But the further they ran, the more the ground trembled. The walls of the temple were cracking, and the floor beneath their feet seemed to buckle with every step. "Nova," Liam's voice rang out from behind her. "We can't keep this up. We need to find shelter." Nova glanced over her shoulder at him. He was right. The team couldn't outrun the disaster they were causing. The whole structure was coming down, and the Kyrics knew it. Their pursuit was relentless, their drones closing in, firing in perfect formation. "Up ahead," Nova shouted, pointing to a narrow passage to the left. "In there." "Go," they veered off, running into the dark corridor that seemed to wind deeper into the heart of the mountain. The entrance to the temple was now blocked by falling stone, but this new path offered a glimpse of escape. Nova didn't know where it led, but it was their only chance. "Stay sharp," Nova ordered, her voice low but firm. The group entered the passageway, the air growing colder as they descended further into the mountain. The walls were covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. This was no ordinary temple. It wasn't just a place of worship or a monument. It was something far more advanced. The technology here was far beyond what humanity had discovered on their own. It felt like stepping into the heart of a mystery no one had solved in centuries. Liam moved ahead, his eyes scanning the walls and floor for signs of traps. The Kyrics had likely set up more defenses, and they couldn't afford to make a mistake. "Everyone, stay close," he said. "We don't know what's ahead." The team followed, moving cautiously through the tunnel. The silence was oppressive. Only the sound of their boots on the stone floor broke the stillness. It was a strange kind of silence, the kind that made Nova feel like they were being watched, even though there was no sign of life. Minutes passed as they moved deeper into the mountain. The walls began to narrow, and the passage became more labyrinthine. The further they went, the more unsettling it felt. Nova couldn't shake the feeling that they were entering a place meant to be forgotten, a place where no one was supposed to survive. Finally, they reached a large chamber, far larger than any they had seen in the temple above. The ceiling stretched high above them, and in the center of the room stood a massive structure, an alien device, much like the one they had seen earlier. It was far more advanced, though, with glowing lines of energy running across its surface like veins. "What is this?" Liam muttered under his breath. Nova stepped forward, her hand hovering just above the device. She could feel the power emanating from it, almost like it was alive. It was a hum, a vibration deep in her bones. She didn't understand it, but she knew it was important. This was what they had been searching for, the source of the Kyrics' power, the key to everything they had learned. "This is it," Nova said softly. "This is what they've been hiding." The relic they had come for was more than just a piece of technology. It was a doorway to something far greater. Nova realized then that they had underestimated the Kyrics. This wasn't just an alien race. They were guardians, protectors of something ancient, something beyond even their understanding. The technology here was not meant for anyone but the Kyrics. "We need to take it," Nova said, her voice resolute. "It's our only way out." Liam looked at her, hesitation flickering in his eyes. "But we don't know what it does. We don't even know if it's safe." "We don't have a choice," Nova replied. "We came here for a reason, and we need to finish what we started." With a deep breath, Nova stepped closer to the device. The energy pulsed again, and she reached out, her fingers brushing against the surface. The moment her skin made contact, the entire room seemed to react. The hum of the energy grew louder, and the floor beneath them shook with sudden force. Liam stepped forward, grabbing her arm. "Nova, something's wrong, we need to go now." But it was too late. The chamber was alive with energy, the walls vibrating with a force Nova couldn't explain. The device seemed to pulse with a dangerous, raw power. Suddenly, a series of sharp, blinding lights shot out from the device, illuminating the entire room. For a moment everything went white, and then the world went silent. Nova blinked, her vision swimming. The hum of the device had stopped and the shaking had ceased. Slowly, she rose to her feet, shaking off the dizziness that clouded her thoughts. The team was still around her, but the atmosphere had changed. The air felt different, heavier, charged with something unfamiliar. "What just happened?" Liam asked, his voice tense. Nova looked around. The chamber hadn't changed, but something was wrong. The walls no longer glowed with the same light. The air felt thick, oppressive. She could almost taste the energy in the air. "I think," Nova started, her voice trailing off. She looked down at her hands. They felt strange, like they were buzzing with energy. "I think we've activated something." "What do you mean?" Liam asked, his eyes narrowing. "I don't know," Nova admitted, looking back at the team. "But whatever we've done, we've triggered something that wasn't meant to be triggered." As the team gathered around, the atmosphere grew even more tense. They had uncovered something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The Kyrics weren't just trying to protect a relic. They were protecting a power beyond their understanding, and they had just unlocked it. Suddenly, a rumble shook the floor again, but this time it wasn't the temple collapsing. It was something else. A deep, growling sound filled the chamber, like the earth itself was waking up. "The Kyrics aren't the only ones here," Nova whispered, her heart racing. "Something else, something worse, is coming." The ground trembled again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the unstable temple threatening to collapse, nor was it the trembling of a distant explosion. The entire chamber seemed to resonate, as if it were alive, responding to the ancient energy that Nova and her team had unleashed. The hum of the massive alien device grew louder, its strange glow intensifying. The walls of the chamber now pulsed with light, casting eerie shadows across the team as they gathered in tight formation. "What did we do?" Liam asked, his voice tense. He had always been the calm one, but now his eyes were wide with worry. "We've awakened something," Nova replied, her own voice filled with uncertainty, "and I think it's far more dangerous than we realized." Behind her, the team remained alert, their weapons drawn. Despite their training, none of them could shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something far worse than they had imagined. The air was thick, almost oppressive, with the weight of something ancient and unknown pressing in on them. Suddenly, a low, growling noise echoed through the chamber. It wasn't the rumble of machinery or the tremors from the collapsing temple. No, this was something far more primal, something alive. "I don't like this," one of the team members, Sergeant Vega, muttered, her finger tightening on the trigger of her weapon. "We need to get out of here. Now." Nova raised a hand, signaling for the team to hold their positions. Her eyes scanned the room, trying to make sense of the strange sound. The noise came again, louder this time, reverberating off the walls. It wasn't just a noise, it was a call. From the far side of the chamber, shadows began to shift. At first it was subtle, like the walls themselves were moving. But then something more solid appeared, massive, hulking shapes emerging from the darkness. "Everyone, stay calm," Nova ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos rising in her chest. "We don't know what those are yet. Don't make any sudden moves." But it was clear that the creatures emerging from the shadows were not friendly. They were tall, covered in dark, chitinous armor, their glowing eyes locked on the humans. Each step they took sent vibrations through the floor, and their movements were almost predatory. Liam stepped forward, his voice low. "Those are Kyrics. What are they?" Nova's mind raced. The Kyrics were ancient, yes, but they weren't the only ones who had left traces of their civilization in this world. There was something far older here, something buried beneath layers of history. And now, whatever it was had been awakened. One of the hulking creatures let out a deep, resonating growl, and the team quickly spread out, taking defensive positions. "Get ready," Nova said, her hand tightening on the grip of her blaster. "We don't know what they want, but we can't let them get close." The first creature lunged, moving faster than its size suggested. It was on top of one of the team members in a flash, its clawed hands swinging down. The human barely managed to dodge, but the blow sent him crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. "Open fire," Nova shouted, her heart pounding. Blaster shots filled the air, striking the creature in its armored chest, but the blasts had little effect. The creature barely seemed to flinch. Nova's mind raced. These weren't just regular enemies, these things were built for war. Liam moved to Nova's side, his own weapon blazing with precision. "These things are tough. We need to find a weak spot." But before they could strategize, another of the creatures charged forward, its massive form barreling toward them. It was fast, too fast for something so large. Nova barely managed to dodge its swipe, rolling to the side. The others fought bravely, but the creature's strength and speed were overwhelming. Nova watched as one of her teammates, Corporal Jace, was knocked to the ground by a creature's powerful claw. The monster roared in triumph, its glowing eyes flashing as it moved to finish its attack. "No!" Nova shouted, rushing forward. Without thinking, she fired a shot at the creature's exposed side. This time the blaster bolt found its mark, and the creature staggered back with a roar of pain. It was a weak spot. "Jace, move!" Nova yelled. The corporal scrambled to his feet, his face pale but determined. He dashed out of the way, narrowly avoiding another swing from the creature. Nova's mind raced. The creatures were relentless and they weren't stopping. Their armor was nearly impenetrable, but there had to be a way to defeat them. Then it hit her. The device in the center of the chamber, it was still active, still resonating with energy. What if the energy could be used against them? "Liam," Nova called. "The device. We need to overload it, use its power." Liam turned, his eyes flashing with understanding. "Got it. But we need to make sure it doesn't turn on us." Nova nodded. She wasn't sure how the device worked, but it was their only hope. She motioned for the others to cover her as she sprinted toward the center of the chamber, her boots pounding against the stone floor. The creatures pursued her, but the rest of the team kept their attention on them, firing at their weak spots and buying Nova the time she needed. She reached the device, her hands moving quickly over the alien controls. The energy inside it was wild, chaotic. She could feel it thrumming beneath her fingers, but there was a panel, a hidden switch beneath the surface. With a determined breath, she pressed it. The room shuddered violently. A burst of energy surged from the device, sending a shockwave through the chamber. The creatures howled as the blast struck them, their bodies convulsing from the energy that coursed through them. Their chitinous armor cracked, and one of them fell to the ground motionless. But the battle wasn't over. The remaining creatures charged forward, their roars filling the air. Nova barely managed to dodge another strike from a massive claw, but she couldn't keep up the pace forever. "Liam," she shouted. "We need to overload the device now." Liam was already there, racing toward her. On it, he quickly began inputting commands into the device. Nova kept her eyes on the remaining creatures, firing shots to keep them at bay, but it was clear they couldn't hold out much longer. One of the creatures leaped toward her, its claws aimed for her throat. In that moment, everything seemed to slow. Just as the creature was about to strike, Liam hit the final button on the device. A massive explosion of energy erupted from the center, engulfing the creatures in a blinding light. The energy wave ripped through the chamber, leaving nothing but scorched remains. The silence that followed was deafening. Nova, her chest heaving with relief, slowly lowered her weapon. The room was now eerily still, the danger temporarily gone. But they weren't out of the woods yet. The temple was still collapsing, and the team needed to leave. "Move now," Nova ordered, snapping her team back into action. They had survived the worst, but they still had a long way to go before they could claim victory. The team turned and sprinted toward the exit, the echoes of their footsteps ringing through the dark passageways. The temple was dying, and the clock was ticking. The Kyrics might have been protecting their secrets, but Nova was determined to ensure humanity's place in the stars. The air was thick with the smell of dust and scorched metal as the team raced through the crumbling corridors of the temple. The ground shook violently beneath their feet, the sound of falling debris echoing in the distance. Nova's heart pounded in her chest, and she didn't look back. The only thing that mattered was getting out of here alive. "Keep moving," Nova shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The team pushed forward, their weapons raised, eyes scanning every corner as they sprinted down the narrow passage. Behind them, the sound of the temple collapsing grew louder, and the walls around them seemed to buckle and shift. Time was running out. "Nova, we're almost out of time," Liam called, his voice urgent. Nova didn't need to be told twice. She quickened her pace, her eyes focused on the distant exit. They had activated the energy device, destroyed the alien creatures guarding the temple, but the price for that victory had been steep. The entire structure was coming down, and if they didn't make it to the escape shuttle in time, they would be trapped. The passage ahead was narrow and winding, the walls glowing faintly with strange symbols. They passed quickly, ignoring the unfamiliar markings. The mission wasn't about unlocking ancient secrets anymore. It was about survival. "We're almost there," Jace called from the back of the group, his voice filled with relief. Nova turned a corner and saw the dim light of the shuttle bay at the end of the tunnel. Their shuttle was still there, waiting for them, its engines humming softly as if it too were ready to leave this cursed place. But then, just as they were about to reach the final stretch, a loud, shrill screech echoed from the shadows ahead. Nova's eyes snapped to the sound, and her pulse quickened. A massive figure stepped out from the darkness, taller than anything they had seen before, its armored body covered in ancient Kyrix markings. Its glowing eyes locked onto Nova with a cold, calculating stare. This was no creature. They had triggered something even worse. The final guardian, perhaps, the last line of defense to prevent anyone from escaping with the knowledge of the Kyrix. "Everyone back to the shuttle," Nova shouted, but it was already too late. The creature moved fast, blocking their only escape route. It let out another blood-curdling screech and raised its enormous weapon, a massive, spiked club glowing with energy. The team spread out, their weapons ready, but Nova knew the odds weren't in their favor. "Liam," Nova said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her stomach. "We can't take this thing head-on. We have to find a way to overload the shuttle's engines. It's the only way to make sure it doesn't follow us." Liam nodded, his eyes scanning the creature's movements. "I'll handle the engines. You keep this thing distracted." The team split, each member moving with purpose. Nova's eyes never left the creature as it swung its spiked club toward them, the air crackling with energy. She fired, hitting the creature square in the chest, but the blast barely seemed to faze it. "Keep it busy," Liam called, already sprinting toward the shuttle's engine room. Nova's heart raced as she kept moving, dodging the creature's attacks and firing at its weak spots, but it was like fighting a wall. The creature was too strong, too powerful, and it seemed to be getting faster with each swing. "Come on, Liam," Nova muttered under her breath, keeping her focus on the creature. She couldn't afford to lose. They had come too far to let this be the end. The team's fire was relentless, but it wasn't enough to bring the creature down. One of the team members, Sergeant Vega, dove to the side just as the creature's club came crashing down, narrowly avoiding the deadly blow. It was clear, this creature wasn't just a guard. It was an executioner, and it was determined to see them fail. Then Nova heard it, the sound of the shuttle's engines roaring to life. "Liam," she shouted, her voice filled with relief. The creature seemed to sense the change. It turned its attention toward the shuttle, roaring in fury. It moved toward the shuttle bay at a frightening speed, its eyes fixed on Nova. But Nova wasn't finished yet. She turned toward the creature, firing one last shot from her blaster. The energy bolt hit its mark, but the creature only staggered slightly, its expression remaining cold. It swung its weapon, aiming straight for her. With one final burst of adrenaline, Nova dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the club's strike. She rolled across the floor, landing in a crouch. Without thinking, she pulled the emergency lever on the shuttle's control panel, sealing the bay doors. The creature roared in frustration, but it was too late. The shuttle's engines powered up and the doors slammed shut with a deafening clang. "We're out," Liam said, his voice filled with relief. Nova stood up, wiping the sweat from her forehead. She took a deep breath, letting the rush of victory wash over her. The shuttle's engines roared louder, lifting them off the ground and out of the collapsing temple. Through the small viewports, Nova saw the massive structure crumble, falling in on itself, the final remnants of the Kyrix civilization disappearing into the dust. The team was safe, for now. They settled into their seats, their bodies aching from the battle. Nova looked at her team, each of them looking back at her with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. They had done it. They had survived. They had secured the relic, defeated the creatures, and escaped the collapsing temple. And yet, despite the victory, Nova knew this was just the beginning. She looked out the window, watching as the debris from the temple fell away, leaving nothing but a pile of rubble behind. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and unknowable. Humanity's place in the galaxy was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: they had earned their place. They had proved they could survive, adapt, and overcome the impossible. Liam sat beside her, his face tired but determined. "What now, Nova?" Nova looked at him and then turned her gaze back to the stars. "Now we find out what this relic really means. We've just scratched the surface." He nodded, a small grin tugging at his lips. "One bed, no rules." Nova chuckled softly, the tension in her body finally starting to ease. "Let's just focus on surviving the next mission first." The shuttle zoomed through the stars, heading toward an uncertain future, but Nova knew one thing for sure. As long as they had each other, humanity would continue to fight, explore, and survive. Together, they would face whatever came next.